Since you started your work, what was almost 20 years ago, did you say? 20. What have you seen in terms of changes in the problem set that you're dealing with now? I.e., what are the new problems that you're confronted with in your clinical practice when couples or people come to you?
Yeah, that's a good one, because lots of things have stayed the same, right? So we know that, for example, problems with desire remain the most common reason why people end up in my clinical room. But lots of things have also shifted. Data actually shows those shifts over the last few decades. So we have long-term data into the lives of people in the UK in terms of their sex lives. And we know that we're having less sex this decade than we were the decade before and the decade before that. So the amount of sex we're having, for example, is going down. From my clinical hunches, but also from what's been written about in the research, we have a good idea that that's about our pace of life, our work-life balance, our distractibility, our use of devices. It's become evident in the last kind of 2 decades that when it comes to sex, attention is a really key part of it. It's really key. So being able to pay attention to what's happening in your body, or being able to pay attention to what's happening in your mind, is crucial. But as a society, I think we're getting less and less able to pay attention. We're getting more and more in pursuit of distraction. And that shows itself all the time in sex therapy. You know, couples who come to see me because they feel that they're never having sex. But yet, when you look at their week, they actually have very little time together. And the time together they do have, they're both busy scrolling, they're watching Netflix and scrolling, they're perhaps doing 3 things at once, they're checking their work emails. That's taking them to a whole new cognitive place of stress. And so it's no wonder that people don't have space for their desire to emerge. And that's definitely a newer phenomenon.
It kind of made me think of some of the things I was reading about in your books, where you say that couples and individuals who do mindfulness practices are those that typically have the most desire. I think the quote is from your newest book, which is, the book is called How Not to Let Having Kids Ruin Your Sex Life.
Yeah, it's a bit of a mouthful.
It's a great title. It says, research tells us that women who find it easier to have orgasms are typically more mindful in everyday life and find it easier to be in the moment during sex.
That's right.
Chapter 3.
That's right. So there's an enormous amount of data about attention and sex. And obviously one of the ways in which we can sharpen our attention is mindfulness. We know that mindfulness works across a range of challenges that we face, whether it's pain management, whether it's sleep, whether it's about appetite regulation, all kinds of things. But when it comes to sex, it's super powerful. So when you're distracted during sex, and we know that over 90% of people have non-sexual thoughts during sex. Okay, so everyone gets distracted. We know that from the research. But what happens when we start to get distracted most of the time, or when those distractions are what we call cognitively salient, which means they're worrying or they're particularly stressful, like, oh, I'm not going to come, or what if I don't stay hard, or is she enjoying this? Those types of distractions. What happens is our distraction is basically turning down our arousal, like turning down the volume on the TV. So it becomes harder for our bodies to respond, so to stay aroused, for example. It becomes harder for us to feel anything, so our pleasure is turned down. It becomes harder for us to come. And ultimately, over time, it gets in the way of our desire. On the contrary, if we work on that distraction, either by trying to remove them, or trying to tackle the worries at their root cause, or trying to promote our ability to pay attention where we want it to be, so that's sexual thoughts, sexual sensations, pleasure, then it's like turning up the volume. And we've seen plenty of research that demonstrates the enormously powerful impact of mindfulness on sexual response.
I can think of times in my life where, because I was stressed or worried, when I got in bed, I was worrying about something or stressing about something at work.
Yeah.
My partner tried to have sex with me and I had zero chance of getting aroused. I could not get an erection. And I remember those moments and thinking, oh, she's going to think that it's about her, but really it's because of this thing I have on my to-do list.
That's exactly right.
I'd got in bed doing my to-do list. So I was holding my to-do list and I was doing it on my phone and I put the phone down and then I lay back and I'm still thinking about my to-do list and then she tries to initiate and there's zero chance.
That's it. And that's also exactly what we were talking about earlier on, right? Which is that our society has changed, the way we work has changed. So perhaps 3 decades ago, you wouldn't have been checking your emails just before bed, which means that wouldn't have started that cascade of thoughts about work, which would then perhaps peak your cortisol, your stress levels, and then cut off your ability to get turned on. So that is one of the major things that has shifted for all of us. And I think, one of the myths that we, would benefit from quashing about sex is this idea that particularly men are always up for it, are always ready to have sex. It's just not true. In fact, everybody needs their kind of conditions for good sex, as I call it, to be right. They need to be in the right kind of headspace. They need to be not distracted. They need to know that the environment is an environment that works for them. It's quite important. So, yeah, your experience it mirrors what a lot of people are probably sat at home thinking about just